It was one of those nights when the city felt colder than usual, the kind of cold that seeps through your clothes and into your bones. I was sitting under the bridge, near the old shipping yard, huddled in the corner where the wind didn't hit as hard. The traffic above me hummed like a distant storm, and every so often, headlights would flicker through the gaps in the concrete. That spot was my place. My corner. Nobody bothered me there. I was tearing into the half-stale sandwich I'd grabbed from the dumpster behind Miller's Deli when I noticed him. At first, I didn't think much of it. People wandered these streets all the time. But this man was different. He didn't look like he belonged there. His coat was clean, expensive. The kind of wool coat you only see in stores where they don't even bother putting price tags on the racks. His shoes were shiny, his steps slow and uneven, like he didn't know where he was going. Or maybe, like he didn't even know who he was. I stayed quiet and watched him from the shadows. He stopped in the middle of the empty road, looking around like the city had swallowed him whole. There was something strange in his face, confusion, fear, and this emptiness. Like he wasn't really there. I don't know why, but I got up. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was instinct. Or maybe I just wanted to feel human for a second, to talk to someone who wasn't yelling at me to get lost. "Hey," I called out, my voice echoing under the bridge. "You okay, mister?" The man turned slowly, his eyes sharp but unfocused. For a second, I thought he might yell at me or tell me to leave him alone. But instead, his lips trembled, like he was trying to form words he couldn't quite find. Do you know where I am?" His voice cracked. It wasn't just confusion, it was fear. Pure, raw fear. I stepped closer, my hands raised like I needed to prove I wasn't dangerous. Up close, I noticed more details. The fine lines around his eyes, the expensive watch on his wrist, real gold, not the fake stuff some hustlers wear. My mind started piecing things together. I'd seen that face before. Not in real life, but on a billboard on Fifth Avenue, smiling like a king, selling something I could never afford. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just some lost man. This was Richard Dempsey, the billionaire everyone had been talking about on the news. The one who'd vanished 3 weeks ago without a trace. The man the whole world was looking for, standing right there in front of me, shaking like a leaf, asking me where he was. For a moment, I froze. My brain couldn't process it. The TV had made him look untouchable, like some kind of god, and now here he was, broken and scared, talking to a homeless kid like me. "Do you know me?" he asked, his eyes locking onto mine, desperate, pleading. I swallowed hard. "Yeah," I said, barely above a whisper. "I know you." He blinked, confused. "Who am I?" I didn't know what to say. How do you tell a man that the whole world thinks he's dead? That his face is plastered on every news channel, every headline, every social feed? You're Richard Dempsey," I said finally. "The guy on the news. The billionaire. Everyone's looking for you." For a moment, he just stared at me, like I'd said something impossible. Then, his expression changed, panic, dread, something darker. He stumbled back, muttering under his breath. Words I couldn't understand, like fragments of some nightmare he couldn't wake up from. I wanted to help him, but before I could take another step, he turned and bolted into the night, disappearing into the maze of alleys behind the docks. I ran after him, but he was faster than I expected. By the time I reached the corner, he was gone, swallowed by the shadows. I stood there, my chest heaving, my heart pounding like it wanted to tear out of my ribcage. My mind kept replaying his face, his voice, that question, "Who am I?" I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there under the bridge, staring at the city lights, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. And deep down, I knew one thing for sure, whatever had happened to Richard Dempsey, it wasn't an accident. And somehow, for reasons I couldn't explain, I knew I was the only one who could find him. By morning, I was sure of it, what I'd seen wasn't a dream or some hallucination brought on by hunger. I had met Richard Dempsey. The billionaire everyone thought was dead or kidnapped. His face had been all over the news for weeks, and now I'd seen him, breathing, scared, lost. The first person I told was Officer Martinez. He was the only cop in the area who didn't treat me like garbage. I waited by the precinct until I saw him coming out for his coffee break. "Martinez," I called, jogging toward him. "I saw him. I saw Richard Dempsey last night." He turned, squinting at me like I'd just told him aliens landed under the bridge. "Who?" The billionaire, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The one that's been missing. He was down by the docks. He looked confused, scared. I swear, it was him. Martinez sighed, rubbing his temple. Kid, you've been on the streets too long. You probably saw some drunk guy in a coat in. No. It was him. I saw the watch, the face. I know what I saw. I shouted, feeling my throat tighten with frustration. His voice softened, like he was talking to a child. Look, I get it. Maybe you think you saw something. But guys like him? They don't just wander the docks at night. Go get some sleep, alright? That was it. He patted my shoulder and walked away, leaving me standing there, humiliated and angry. I tried the shelter next. Miss Diane was kind to me most nights, letting me sneak in after curfew when it was freezing. She was at the desk, sorting papers, when I burst in. Miss Diane, I said, trying to catch my breath. I need your help. Richard Dempsey, he's alive. I saw him. She looked up slowly, her face unreadable. Honey, that man's been missing for weeks. The FBI's involved. Do you really think? Yes, I think. I'm telling you, I saw him. He didn't even know who he was. Someone's hurt him, or drugged him, or something. He needs help. Her expression softened with pity, and I hated it. I know things have been hard for you, baby. But sometimes our minds play tricks on us. Especially when we're tired, or scared, or hungry. I slammed my hands on the counter. I'm not crazy. He was there. Why won't anyone believe me? She reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled away and stormed out before she could say another word. The rest of the day, I tried anyone who would listen, people on the street, workers at the diner, even a news crew filming a segment nearby. They all looked at me the same way, like I was just another homeless kid with wild stories. By nightfall, my frustration turned into something darker. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe I just wanted to believe I'd seen him because believing gave me purpose. But then I remembered his eyes, sharp, frightened, desperate. You can't make up a look like that. It stays with you. So I went back to the docks. The same bridge, the same alleyways, searching for any sign that he'd been there. Trash cans overturned, footprints in the dirt, a crumpled paper cup. Nothing. Hours passed. My stomach growled. My legs ached. Still nothing. But just as I was about to give up, I saw something glinting near the edge of the pier, a button. Not just any button, but the kind sewn onto expensive coats, with a tiny logo etched into the gold. The same logo I'd seen on his jacket the night before. I held it in my hand, my chest tightening. It was real. He was real. I sat there on the pier, staring at the water as the city lights reflected on the surface. Nobody believed me. Nobody cared. But I knew the truth. And if nobody else was going to help him, then I would. By the way, if you're still here listening to this, hit that subscribe button. There are so many stories like this one that I need to share with you, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. That night, I made a promise to myself. Whatever it took, however long it took, I was going to find Richard Dempsey again. I barely slept after finding that button on the pier. I kept turning it over in my hand, tracing the tiny logo with my thumb, replaying his face in my mind over and over again. It wasn't just proof that I'd seen him, it was a sign. He'd been there, and if he'd been there once, maybe he'd come back. Or maybe, just maybe, I could figure out where he went. The next morning, I started asking questions. Not to cops or news reporters, they'd already written me off. I went to the people who actually knew the streets, the guys who slept in abandoned warehouses, the women who worked the corners, the junkies who noticed everything because they had nothing else to do. Most of them didn't care, but one man, Freddie, a Vietnam vet who slept under the overpass near the train yard, nodded when I showed him the button. Yeah, he said, scratching his beard. I seen a guy like that. Fancy coat, shiny shoes. Kept mumbling about someone chasing him. Thought he was just another rich guy who lost his mind. Saw him heading toward the old freight yard a few nights back. The old freight yard. I hadn't been there in years. It was a ghost town, half the buildings boarded up, the other half falling apart. Perfect place to disappear. That night, I went there. The air smelled like rust and salt water, and the only sounds were the distant hum of traffic and the occasional screech of rats scurrying in the dark. I searched every corner, every broken window, every pile of trash. Nothing. Just when I was about to give up, I saw it, a scrap of paper tucked into a crack in the wall of an abandoned office. It was smudged and damp, but the handwriting was neat, expensive, like the kind you see on letters, not grocery lists. There were names. A list of them. Some crossed out in thick black ink, others circled. I didn't recognize any of the names, but something about it made my stomach turn. It felt dangerous. I folded the paper carefully and shoved it into my pocket. The next few days, I went back every night, searching for more. That's when I found the badge. It was lying in the dirt near one of the old loading docks, a security badge with Dempsey Industries stamped across the front. The plastic was cracked, but the name was still clear, Richard Dempsey. Holding it in my hand, I felt this surge of energy, like I wasn't just some nobody anymore. I was part of something big, something that mattered. But the deeper I dug, the more I realized someone else was digging too. One night, I caught a glimpse of movement near the fence. At first, I thought it was another homeless guy, but then I saw the glint of a watch, the shine of polished shoes. Whoever it was, they didn't belong there. And they were watching me. I ducked behind a stack of rusted barrels, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it. I stayed hidden until I heard the sound of an engine starting and a black SUV pulling away. That was when I knew someone didn't want me there. Someone didn't want me finding him. But I couldn't stop. Not now. Not when I'd seen the fear in Richard's eyes, the desperation in his voice. Every lead I found pointed to the same thing. This wasn't some random disappearance. Someone had planned this. Someone had taken everything from him and dumped him on the streets to be forgotten. I wasn't sure why, or how, but deep down, I knew one thing: I was the only one who cared enough to find him. And if that meant putting myself in danger, so be it. By the end of that week, I'd memorized the names on that list. I didn't know what they meant yet, but I had a feeling they were the key to all of this. And somewhere out there, Richard Dempsey was alone, scared, and waiting for someone, anyone, to help him. I decided that someone would be me. The first time I felt it, that creeping sense that I wasn't alone, it was just past midnight, a few nights after I found the badge. I was leaving the freight yard, my backpack heavy with scraps of paper and bits of evidence I'd collected. The streets were quiet, the kind of quiet that feels wrong in a city that never truly sleeps. Then I heard it, the low hum of an engine idling somewhere behind me. I told myself it was nothing, just another car waiting at a light, but when I turned the corner, the headlights followed. Slow. Deliberate. I ducked into an alley, my heart pounding so hard it drowned out the sound of my footsteps. The car didn't follow me in, but it didn't drive off either. It just sat there, engine running, like whoever was inside wanted me to know they were there. After what felt like forever, the hum faded, and the car disappeared down the block. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just been marked. The next day, I tried to ignore it, convincing myself I was being paranoid. But that night, it happened again, the same black SUV creeping along the street near the shelter, the same tinted windows, the same slow, steady pace. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? They already thought I was some kid spinning stories. And besides, deep down, I knew the truth: someone had noticed me snooping around. Someone knew I'd found something I wasn't supposed to. 2 nights later, things got worse. I was heading back to the bridge when a man stepped out of the shadows near the corner store. He was tall, dressed in a dark suit that didn't fit the neighborhood. His shoes were spotless, like they'd never touched dirt. "Kid," he said, his voice calm but sharp, like a knife cutting through the air. "We need to talk." I froze. "I don't know you." "No," he said, taking a step closer. "But you've been asking questions. About things you don't understand. Dangerous things." I tightened my grip on my backpack, every instinct screaming at me to run. "I don't know what you're talking about." He smiled, not a kind smile, but the kind that tells you you're not safe. "Walk away, kid. Forget whatever you think you saw. Forget the man under the bridge. People who dig too deep." He leaned in close, his breath cold against my ear. "Don't last long in the city." Before I could reply, he turned and disappeared into the night, slipping into the back seat of a car that pulled away without a sound. I stood there, frozen, my knees weak. Every part of me wanted to listen to him, to let it go and crawl back into the safety of anonymity. But then I thought about Richard, the way his eyes had looked, the way his voice had cracked when he asked, "Who am I?" And I knew I couldn't stop. Over the next few days, the warnings got louder. My things at the shelter were rifled through. A note, written in neat block letters, appeared in my backpack: "Stop looking." And then there were the shadows. Always there, just at the edge of my vision, men in suits lingering near the freight yard, the same SUV parked across from the diner where I grabbed free water, the same feeling of being watched even when the streets looked empty. I started sleeping in different places each night, under the overpass, in the corner of the park, sometimes on the roof of the old hardware store, anywhere they wouldn't expect me. I kept my evidence hidden in a rusted locker at the train station, the key on a string around my neck. Every sound made me jump. Every stranger's glance felt like a threat. But fear has a strange way of sharpening you. Instead of backing down, I started paying closer attention. Noticing patterns. That's when I saw him again. Not Richard, but one of the men from the alley, standing near the yard, talking to someone on a phone. I stayed hidden, watching as he paced, his voice low and urgent. "We need to find him," he said. "The kid's getting too close." The kid. Me. I ducked out before he could see me, my heart hammering against my ribs. But that night, lying awake in the shadows of the bridge, a thought settled and that scared me more than anything else. This wasn't just about finding Richard anymore. Whoever had done this to him, they were dangerous. And now they knew my face. My name. My routine. But I also knew something they didn't. I wasn't going to stop. Not until I found him. Not until I understood why a man worth billions had been left to rot on the streets, stripped of everything, including his own memory. Danger was everywhere now, lurking in every corner, hiding behind every shadow. But so was the truth. And if I wanted answers, I had to be willing to risk everything to get them. It was raining that night, not the kind of light drizzle that makes the city smell clean, but a heavy, relentless downpour that soaked everything and turned the alleys into rivers of dirty water. I almost didn't go out. Something told me to stay hidden, that it was safer. But something stronger, that stubborn feeling that I was close, pushed me back to the freight yard. I stuck to the shadows, my hood pulled low, my shoes splashing quietly in the puddles. The place was quiet, too quiet, except for the steady patter of rain on the rusted metal roofs. I walked past the same abandoned offices, the same stacks of forgotten crates, telling myself this was just another dead end. And then I heard it. A voice. Faint, broken, humming. I froze, straining to listen over the rain. It was coming from the far end of the yard, near an old warehouse I'd never been inside. The windows were boarded up, but light flickered faintly through a crack in the door. I crept closer, my heart pounding. Every step felt like a mile. When I reached the door, I pressed my ear against the wood. The humming was clearer now, but it wasn't a song. It was a name. Over and over again, whispered like a prayer. Anna. Anna. I pushed the door open just enough to slip inside, the hinges groaning softly. The air hit me first, damp, stale, and sharp with the scent of old chemicals. The room was empty except for a broken chair in the corner, a pile of dirty blankets, and a man sitting on the floor, knees pulled to his chest. Richard Dempsey. His once perfect suit was torn and filthy, his face thinner, his hair matted, his eyes distant. He didn't even notice me at first, just kept rocking gently, whispering that name. "Richard," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. His head snapped up, and for a moment, there was nothing in his eyes but fear. He scrambled back against the wall, his hands up like I was there to hurt him. "No," he said, shaking his head. "No more, please, no more." "It's me," I said quickly, stepping closer but keeping my hands where he could see them. "The kid from under the bridge. You remember? I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to get you out of here." Something flickered in his expression, confusion first, then recognition, like a light struggling to turn on. You found me," he whispered. "Yeah," I said, forcing a small smile. "And I'm not leaving without you." He hesitated, his body trembling, his eyes darting to the shadows around us. "They'll kill you," he muttered. "They'll kill us both." "Not tonight," I said. "Come on. We have to move." I reached out my hand, and after what felt like an eternity, he took it. His grip was weak, but there was something there, trust, or maybe just desperation. We moved fast, keeping low and quiet, slipping through the gaps in the fence at the back of the yard. My heart raced with every step, every sound, convinced that black SUV would appear out of nowhere, that the men in suits would drag us back. But somehow, the night stayed on our side. By the time we reached the old church on the corner of 8th and Maple, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. Father Thomas, the priest who let me sleep in the basement when it got too cold, didn't ask questions when he saw us. He just ushered us in, locked the door, and handed me an old blanket. Richard sat there on the wooden pew, silent, staring at the crucifix like he was trying to remember how to pray. I didn't push him. I just sat nearby, letting the quiet settle between us. After a while, he spoke. His voice was hoarse, fragile. "They did this to me," he said. "People I trusted. People I thought were family. They wanted me gone. Wanted my name, my company, everything." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, letting him know I was listening. He turned to me, his eyes wet but sharp for the first time since I'd met him. "You saved me," he said. "A kid with nothing, saved me." I shook my head. "I didn't save you. I just didn't give up." But in that moment, sitting in the dim light of that old church, I realized something. This wasn't just about him anymore. Somewhere along the way, finding Richard had become about more than proving I wasn't crazy, more than getting someone to finally listen. It was about doing the one thing nobody else in this city seemed willing to do. Caring. That night, as the rain finally stopped and the city went quiet, I promised him, and myself, that whatever it took, I wasn't going to let him be lost again. I didn't sleep for 2 nights after the rescue. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the warehouse, smelled the damp concrete, and heard the billionaire's raspy voice whispering for help. Reporters swarmed the hospital where he was recovering, and suddenly, the homeless kid everyone ignored was on the front page of every paper. They called me a hero, but that word felt heavy, almost wrong. I wasn't a hero. I was just a kid who didn't want to give up. The police questioned me again and again. They wanted every detail, how I found the clues, how I connected the dots, why I believed so strongly that the man was still alive. At first, they seemed almost suspicious, like they couldn't wrap their heads around how a teenager living on the streets could solve something they couldn't. But eventually, when the evidence lined up with what I'd said, their tone changed. Respect crept in. Gratitude, even. I thought things might calm down after that, but I was wrong. That's when the real storm began. 2 days later, I got a call. It wasn't the police this time. It was the billionaire's personal assistant. Her voice was sharp but careful, like she was weighing every word. "He wants to see you," she said. My stomach tightened. For weeks, I'd imagined what it would be like to meet him properly, not tied up and weak, not in the chaos of the rescue. But when the car pulled up and drove me to his estate, I realized nothing could have prepared me for what was waiting. The mansion was more like a palace, with marble floors that echoed under my worn-out sneakers and walls lined with expensive art I couldn't even name. The assistant led me into a massive study where he sat by the window, his face still pale but his eyes sharper than I remembered. "You knew," he said as soon as I walked in. No greeting, no small talk. Just those 2 words. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Tell me," he said. "How?" So I did. I told him about the boy in the park, the way he muttered things that didn't make sense to anyone else, the numbers scribbled on the old piece of cardboard, the alley where I found the hidden message. I told him how everyone laughed at me, how even I questioned myself sometimes, but something kept pushing me forward. When I finished, there was a long silence. He leaned back in his chair, studying me like I was some kind of puzzle. Finally, he said, "You're not just some kid off the streets, are you? There's more to you." I didn't know what to say to that. Then he told me something that froze me in place. The kidnapping, he explained, wasn't random. It was planned by people close to him, people he trusted. They wanted me out of the picture, he said, his voice shaking with controlled anger. They thought they could control everything once I was gone. Hearing that sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't just about money or power, it was betrayal on a level I couldn't imagine. And somehow, without even meaning to, I'd walked straight into the middle of it. He thanked me, of course. Told me I'd saved his life, that I'd given him a second chance. But then he said something I didn't expect: "You deserve better than the streets. Let me help you." The words hung in the air, heavy and unreal. For so long, no one had seen me, not really. I was invisible, just another face people avoided making eye contact with. And now, here was one of the richest men in the country, offering me a lifeline I never thought I'd have. I wish I could say I accepted right away, but the truth is, I hesitated. The streets had taught me to distrust kindness, to assume every offer came with a catch. But looking into his eyes, I didn't see pity. I saw something else, maybe respect. As I left that day, I knew my life had changed forever. What I didn't know was that the danger wasn't completely over. The people who orchestrated the kidnapping hadn't been caught yet, and they weren't the kind to let loose ends dangle. Even now, when I think back to that moment, I can still hear his voice. There's a place for you here, if you want it. But you need to be careful. They're still out there. And that's when it hit me. Rescuing him was only the beginning. The truth was deeper, darker, and more dangerous than I ever imagined. The first night I slept in my own room, a real room, with clean sheets and a door that locked, I barely closed my eyes. It was too quiet, too still. For years, I'd been lulled to sleep by the hum of traffic, the sharp coughs of other kids huddled near the shelters, the occasional siren screaming through the night. Now, lying there staring at the ceiling, I felt like a stranger in my own life. The billionaire, Thomas, insisted I call him by his first name, though it still felt strange on my tongue. He didn't just give me a place to stay. He gave me options I never thought I'd have. Clean clothes. 3 meals a day. A tutor who didn't look at me like I was a lost cause. Even a therapist, someone to talk to about the nights I used to spend wondering if I'd wake up at all. It should have been easy to accept, but it wasn't. Every time I walked down those polished hallways, I half expected someone to tell me it was all a mistake, that I didn't belong there. And maybe, deep down, part of me believed that. But Thomas didn't let me disappear into the background. He kept me busy, teaching me how to manage small tasks around the estate, introducing me to people like I was someone worth knowing. He never made me feel like a project. If anything, he treated me like an equal, like someone who'd proven himself. The investigation dragged on for weeks. The people who'd kidnapped him, the ones who'd wanted him dead, were powerful, and even though most of them were eventually arrested, the fear didn't go away overnight. There were moments when I'd catch Thomas staring out the window, his jaw tight, like he was still listening for footsteps behind him. One evening, over dinner, he said something that stuck with me. "Survival is just the first chapter," he said. "What you do after, that's what defines you." I didn't understand it right away. But slowly, as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, I began to see what he meant. I started taking classes. Real classes, with textbooks and deadlines. It was hard, harder than I expected, but every time I thought about quitting, I remembered the nights I'd spent digging through trash cans just to eat. I remembered how invisible I'd felt, how certain I'd been that nobody cared whether I lived or died. And I kept going. People in town started recognizing me, too. Not as the homeless kid, but as the kid who saved a man everyone thought was gone forever. Strangers would stop me to say thank you, to shake my hand. At first, it made me uncomfortable. But over time, I realized it wasn't really about me, it was about hope. About believing that even when the odds are impossible, someone can still make a difference. Of course, not everything was perfect. Some nights, the memories still came back, the cold streets, the hunger, the sound of that warehouse door slamming shut. But now, I had people to talk to. People who didn't judge me or look at me like I was broken. And Thomas, he became more than just the man I'd rescued. He became the closest thing to family I'd ever had. He never said it outright, but I think he saw something of himself in me, the fight to keep going when everything in the world tells you to give up. One morning, months after the rescue, he handed me a small envelope. Inside was a letter and a key. The letter said the key was to a small apartment in the city, mine, if I wanted it. He'd already paid the first year's rent. At the bottom, in his sharp, deliberate handwriting, he'd written, "A second chance isn't about where you came from. It's about where you're going. Make it count." I stood there with the key in my hand, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I felt like I was running towards something. I moved into that little apartment a few weeks later. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I still visit Thomas every weekend, and every time I do, he smiles like he knows something I don't. Maybe he does. And now, when I walk past the park where I first heard that strange boy talk about the billionaire, I stop for a moment. I think about how close I came to walking away, to ignoring the voice that told me to keep digging. Because sometimes, life hands you a second chance. And when it does, you hold on tight, and you don't let go. There's another story on your screen right now, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. And, if you haven't yet, consider subscribing. There's so much more I want to share with you.